if you don't mind, you can mute yourself so that we can start with the class. Yeah, thank you. So please use the mic. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, good morning, Deep.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, I guess we have everyone. So I mean, a lot of you have actually logged in using student, and just edit your name, and so that if anybody is speaking, I'll be coming to know like who is actually speaking for what. You can just go to the file and edit. Don't change the email address. Leave as is whatever you say, but just say edit your name, so that helps me to understand like who has actually joined the class. Okay. You can go to file and edit your names, so that it will be easy for us to communicate. Okay. Okay. I hope everybody is in, and then as discussed yesterday, like we have talked about the Okay, so we just discussed about how we are going to proceed with the class and everything. So let me just give you the steps now. Like first we'll start with the SQL part, and then later on we'll just go on and then understanding about the data warehousing concepts and everything. So okay. So first thing, let's talk about what is database, what is RDBMS, what are the different types of RDBMS which are available in the market, and all those things. RDBMS products which we have in general. So yeah, in the simple terms, we call it as a database. A database is nothing but a software package which stores the data in the form of tables. And eventually, this in the technical terms, we call it as a DBMS, which is called as a database management system. And here we have a data in the form of tables, and there will be a relationship between the tables. Eventually, the DBMS is converted as an RDBMS. RDBMS is called as a relational database management system, which it is there. And now we have various RDBMS which we have available in the market. So we have something called as a Oracle 11G. And now currently the Oracle 11G is extensively used. Oracle 11G, and you have Teradata, you have Sybase from SAP, and you have DB2 and MS SQL Server. And there are even the open source databases and Greenplum, Netezza. So all these are all the different RDBMS which are available in the market. So all of them stores the structural data. I mean the data in the form of tables. A table is nothing but which consists of rows and columns. When it is storing the data, that is called as a table. So to communicate with all these, so that is one thing that which we use. That language is called as an SQL. So SQL stands for a structured query language, which is used to communicate. It's a universal language. So it's a third generation language. So after your assembly level programming languages and all those things, so it's a third generation language. So which used to communicate with the databases. So SQL is actually broadly classified into three types. So one is called as a DDL. DDL stands for a data definition language. Data definition language. And other is called as a DML. DML called as a data manipulation language. Manipulation is nothing but the modifying of a data manipulation language. And the next one is called as a DRL, which it is called as a data retrieval language. And you also call it as a TCL, which stands for a transaction control language, which it is there, transaction control language. And the other one is called as a DCL, data control language, so which is used to control the permission between the users within the database and permissions on the different objects. That is called as a, so SQL is basically classified into 5 types, and so SQL is nothing but a commands. You're not going to write a syntaxes just like your Java and C language. It is just a command that we'll use, and based on the commands, by using a different commands, we'll communicate with a based on the different commands, we'll communicate with the database. So when we talk about a DDL means you're defining something, you're creating something, or you're defining a, so data definition language is actually used to defining the, so if you want to define something, let's say a table if you want to define, or if you want to create a table, or if you want to drop or remove a table, or if you want to alter the table, then so we will use a DDL language. So what are the commands in the DDL? Create, so alter is to modify it, and drop is used to remove the table from the database. So that's how we'll use it. And similarly, the drop, and we have the other types as well, that is called as a truncate, which is nothing but completely removing the data without undoing the changes. That is also one more statement. So these commands are called as a data definition language commands. So DML means manipulation. So whenever you want to add data to the database tables, or whenever you want to remove the data from the table, or whenever you want to modify some information, then we'll use a manipulation language. That is your insert. Let's say you use update, and you'll also have a delete. So insert is used to add a row to a table. Update is used to update the information in the table. Delete is used to delete a row from a table. So these are all the different DML statements which we use. And DRL stands for a data retrieval language. So you have defined the table and you have added the data. Now, how to read the data from data? So how to read the data from table or a multiple tables? For reading of the data, we use a select statement. So this will be extensively we are going to use in ETL testing as well as a BI testing. So this is something that which we are going to use, that is called as a data retrieval language. And the next one is about the transaction control language. So when you talk about transaction control, so this is like a saving of changes permanently and undoing the changes, commit and rollback. Commit is like a control S which permanently changes, saves it, and rollback is like control check which undoes the changes. That is called as a transaction control language. And we also define something called as a grant and revoke. Grant is used to give the permissions on the objects and different users. Whenever you want to give a permission on a particular object or on a different user, you want to give it to some other permission, then we'll use a grant. And whenever you want to take back the permission, that will also use a revoke. So that's how you will use the different commands in the SQL, which helps you to perform all these activities. First, we'll learn some basic queries, and then we will proceed further. We'll proceed further with the actual select statement. So in order to define a table in the database, so we need to have a proper, in order to define a table, first we need to understand what is the table is all about, and you need to also understand what is a column and what is a data type that you need to understand. See, whenever you're defining a table, so table will consist of rows and columns. So rows and columns. So you need to define a column, or you need to define the structure of the table whenever you are defining. So before understanding or defining the table, you need to understand about the data types. What are the different data types that are available? A data type is nothing but it's which categorizes the data. So you'll have a different types of data when you're storing, right? So you'll have a character data, you'll have a number data, you'll have a Boolean data, you'll have a date data type, I mean, which stores all the calendar information and all. So these are all the different data types. So these data types will vary from one database to the other database. So when you say that data types, so whenever you want to store the character related data, only alphabets, then we'll use a character data type. And whenever you want to use a varchar2, this is nothing but which stores the alphanumeric data. In the sense, it will store all the special characters, alphabets, numerics, all those things will be stored. That is your varchar2 alphanumeric data. And similarly, it will also have varchar2 alphanumeric data. And when you want to store the number related data, so most of the time we'll use a number. So character will store maximum of 4,000 characters, and varchar will store around 32,767 characters maximum in Oracle. I'm talking about the Oracle database because we are going to practice all our SQL queries in the Oracle database. So when you move to the other databases, these data types will slightly vary. And when you go to SQL Server, it is varchar only, but when you go to Teradata and all, alphanumeric is called as a string data type. Likewise, data types will be varying, but the functionality is same. So number of p comma s, so suppose let's say when you say number of 10 comma 2, maximum it can store 10 digits, and after the decimal it can store 2 digits. That's how you can define. But number actually stores maximum of 38 digit number, maximum number that it can store is. And similarly, you'll have a date information. So the date information is like which will store the calendar. So whenever you want to store the today's date, yesterday's date, or information like when the employee has joined the organization, all these kind of a date information, if you want to store, we'll use a date. And also there is another thing that is called as a Boolean, which we'll use very rarely. I mean, Boolean which stores a value like true or false, which will be stored. These are the different data types which are available, different data types which are available in the Oracle database. So whenever you want to define a column, you need to define a column of a particular data type. So first let's understand how to define a simple table and how to add the data to that table, and I'll also show you how to read the data from that table. So once we understand that, then we'll jump into the data retrieval language. So how to do that. So suppose let's say you wanted to create a table, and you wanted to create a table which will consist of all the details like a student ID, student name, or all these things which you have, and you wanted to create that table in your database. Student ID, student name, and course which they have joined, and the fee, all those details I just want to, and joining date, when they have joined the course and all those things, I want to do it. So whenever you want to define a table in the database, that is, we use a DDL language. So whenever you want to create a table, we'll use a create command. So how to create a table? So I'll just show you the syntax, and I'll also show you practically how to create it. So let's say you have something called as a create table. So what is a table name? Table name is, let's say, student is a table name which I want to create. And let's say if you want to add any other special characters. So whenever you're defining a table should be consist of maximum of 30 characters, and it should be an alphanumeric. It can be an alphanumeric, but it cannot start with a number. I cannot define a table as 1, 2, 3 student, but I can define a table as student 1, 2, 3. That is enough. I mean, that is possible. So suppose let's say I want to create a table with today's date or student underscore whenever you are taking a backup or something. Let's say 20/08/2014. So this way I can do it. So special characters which are allowed are underscore, hash, and then the dollar. So whenever you are naming any object, so you cannot use a star as a special character. Special characters allowed are underscore, dollar, as well as a hyphen is also not allowed, and the hash. So these are the special characters which are allowed when you are defining a table in the database. So create a table, and whenever you want to name the different columns, so enclose all the columns within the parentheses. Now I have within the parentheses. So let's say you want to define a table, so that is your student ID. Let's say student ID, and student ID will be a number. So I'll just define this as a number of 10 or something. Let's say what I have. And similarly, you have a student name, so which you can define. So student number of 10 if I define, so what does that mean? Like it is maximum consists of 10 digits of ID. It cannot be more than 10 digits. So that's what it means. It can be less than, it should be less than or equal to 10 digits. Student name, let's say if I'm defining it as a varchar2 of 100, maximum it can contain the 100 characters. Beyond that it cannot. So there are two data types actually, varchar2. Varchar2 is called as a variable length character data type. So student name, that is your, which you can define. And similarly, let's say the course which the student has joined. So course, let's say if you define, even this also, you just have it as varchar2 of 100. And let's say you have the fee, so which you call it as a fee, and then let's say this is your number of p comma s. So let's say number of 10 comma 2, which I define it as a number of 10 comma 2. And you can also define something as when the student has actually joined the course, that is your join date. So this is of a date data type. So whenever you are defining it, you need to define a table and then the name of the table, and then you need to provide all the list of column names which is in that list of column names which are provided in that. So now this is called as a different tables which this is how you create a table. See, in order to execute all these commands, you should have an environment to execute it. So how can I connect to the database? So first we need to understand that, which I missed it. So if you want to connect to the database, there are two ways which you can connect to the Oracle database. One is by using the tools. So you have a different types of tools which we generally use in the real time also to connect to the database. So in the training, we are going to use a tool called as a SQL Developer. SQL Developer is an open source tool from Oracle, which helps you to connect to the database and execute all the queries, whatever you have. And there is a other one that is called as a Toad, which is from Dell, and I think it's from Quest Corporation. And you have the other one such as a PL/SQL Developer. So this is also another tool which you have to execute the queries. Likewise, you have a different tools. So using those tools, these tools, if you're executing the queries, it will give you the UI, better UI to view the queries. And you can also execute the Oracle queries from the other environment called as a SQL Plus environment. SQL Plus is an Oracle proprietary environment where you can execute all the queries by using the SQL Plus environment. Either you can execute the queries through SQL Plus, you can use SQL Plus and connect to the database. I'll show you both the ways how to connect to the database, and you have a SQL Developer Toad, both the things I'll show you. So if you want to connect from the SQL Developer, suppose if you want to connect using SQL Plus, there will be a Oracle client should be installed on your database. So let me just show you how the communication will be enabled between the databases when you want to execute something here. Suppose let's say this is a database. If you start providing an access on our database, what will be? It will be something like this, okay? And it will be, this is your, the SQL, let's say any other database. So this database is called as an Oracle 11GDB, which is installed on some machine. So this is a software package which you have. I want to communicate with this database to store the data, everything. So you can have a n number of users here. So user 1, user 2, user 3. Likewise, n number of users can communicate with this one. So everybody will be provided with one user account, or you can use the same user account and then communicate also. So user 1, user 2, user 3, something like this. There will be a different users. So it's like a different computers which you have, and you're communicating to the same database. So user 3. So if you want to communicate, there are two ways, as I said. So you can send a request over the network. It is not necessarily to be both the machines should be connected in the network. You can communicate through the internet, you can communicate through the local LAN as well. So when you want to communicate, there are two ways. As I said, you can use a SQL Plus or a SQL Developer. So whenever you execute a query in your machine, the request will be sent over the network to the database. Within the database, the SQL query will get executed and it will give the response back to you, whether this is succeeded or not. So likewise, different users can fire a different queries to the database. So this is how the communication will be established between the user and the server. I mean, user machine and the server machine. User machine is means like our machine. Let's say you are a tester and you're starting you are firing an Oracle queries or something in your system. There will be a communication which enables. So that is through the Oracle client. You can enable the communication by installing it. So if you're installing the Oracle client, you need to communicate that using SQL Plus environment, or you can also use a SQL developer directly, which helps you to connect to that. So first thing, let's see how to use the SQL Plus environment to connect it. Let's say I have a database called as a ABC database. So I have a database called as a ABC database. And this ABC database, I want to communicate to this ABC database. So whenever you install Oracle, you'll give some name and then you define some database where you start storing. Database is, I mean, it's the same thing again. So which stores the data. So if I want to connect to that database using my Oracle, so if you install Oracle client or Oracle software, when you go to all programs, you'll find something called as Oracle DB11G Home 1. So if you do not have a client or something, you cannot communicate using SQL Plus. All you have to use is a SQL developer. In the real time, we'll use only SQL developer or any other tool. We don't use SQL Plus because it is not so. I mean, on the UI front, it is not so clear that we can view the data clearly. So let's say I want to connect to now the user called as a SQL1. That is this is the database name. So I want to connect to SQL1 at the rate of ABC and enter the password what it asks. So enter it. Now when you enter it, this is a SQL prompt where you can start executing the queries. So if you want to check which user you have connected, this is a command. Show user is a command which it is used to say. It says that you have connected using SQL1 user, and you can start executing the queries here. So suppose, let's say, if you want to know if you want to find out the structure of the table, let's say there is a table called as an employee table. Assume that there is a table already which is created in this. So if you want to know structure of the table, we'll use a command called as a describe. So describe is a command which we'll use to find out the structure of the table. Let's say I want to find out the structure of employees table. Whenever you want to execute in general, this will give you the structure, name of the column, and whether it can be nullable or not nullable. We'll understand about this later. And this is a type. Type is nothing but the data type, number, varchar2, date, and everything. So this is how you can describe it. And if you want to even execute the queries also, you can execute. So whenever you are executing a queries from the SQL Plus, anyway we'll use it. Either you need to use a / or the semicolon at the end of the SQL statement. To execute a query in the SQL Plus, either you need to use a semicolon at the end of it, or you need to use a / to execute the query. So that's how you can execute the queries from the SQL Plus. For this command, I'm not given because that is an SQL Plus command, which it is there. So whenever you want to execute an SQL, suppose let's say I want to know the list of tables which are available in this. So I want to execute this query. This is a query to identify the list of tables in the schema. Select ename from tab. So I want to execute, either I can use a /. So this, it has all these tables which are available in this schema. So before also we need to understand much about it. We need to understand clear difference between what is a database, what is a user, and what is a schema here. So when we talk about a database, under a database you can have a n number of users. Okay, let's consider this. So under a different database you can have a different users. Let's say you have users like SQL1, SQL2, SQL3, something like this, and each user can create their own tables. It is also possible. I mean, they can create their own tables, they can modify, they can drop anything, whatever they want. Under a database, you can have different things. Suppose, let's say I have a SQL1 and you have another user called as a SQL2 and SQL3. So in Oracle, when you say the user or a schema, both are same. If you go to the data, another database, there will be a different hierarchy will be there. Each user can create their own tables. They can create their own tables and other type of objects. Suppose, let's say this user can create a student table and the other user can create a student table. So one database can consist of multiple schemas or the multiple users. A schema or a user is nothing but a group of collection of objects. I mean, group of collection of this database objects, that is called as your schema or a user here. So you can have a different user. So if you want to connect to the database in the real time, then they'll give you one user account to connect to the database where you can start accessing all the tables and everything. So that's how we define. So how can we use a SQL developer? So when we set up a environment, I mean a practice environment for you, you can use this SQL, you can use the SQL developer tool, so to do that. So if you want to enable the SQL developer, so just after copying it, so there will be a shortcut, something like this in your setup folder. You just have to click on this. This will open up a SQL developer here, and using this, you can open and then start executing the queries. So before we start using the queries, we need to create a connection to the database, and then we can define it. So in order to create, it will take a minute. Okay, so let me open here. So suppose, let's say this is SQL developer. I have so many things here, and I just want to connect to this one, SQL1. So let's say I want to connect to the SQL1 user. So I have so many connections here because I keep connecting to so many databases. You can create one connection for each database. Suppose, let's say you want to add this new connection, and now I need the connection name. So you can give connection name anything. So let's say you want to give SQL new or ETL new or whatever, like ETL new practice. So just you can give that, and you can provide the username and password what is provided to you. So let's say, and you can save the password. You can communicate by using this one. So I know that my database is installed in the, so I think it's 105. Let me just quickly cross check. Yeah. So I need this one. So let me show you again how to create a connection here. So click on create. So you call it as ETL and enter the username. So let's say you call it as, that is a host name, in the sense like where the Oracle is installed, and enter the service name is nothing but the database name. So if you just want to test the connectivity, it shows here a success. That means you're able to connect. I just want to save it so that I need not to enter every time the connection and all these details. So if you just want to connect to this ETL, whatever the connection, just double click on it. It will connect you to the database. It will connect you to the database, and you can start executing your queries. So this is the worksheet where you can start executing the queries. Suppose, let's say you want to know so just the same query, you want to know the list of tables which are available in this schema, which are already created. So just, this is a command, select tname from tab. So it is always a good practice to use the, semicolon at the end of the query. So this is a list of tables which are available in this database. So to execute the query, either you can use F9 on your keyboard, or you can use a control enter, or you can use this anything within a SQL developer. If you want to execute a query, F9 or this, which you can use, and then run it. So suppose, let's say now I want to create a table. So before creating any table, first you need to verify whether you have a table of the same name. So you cannot create the table with two tables with the same name. That is not possible. So you need to verify whether you have a table of the similar name. So just go to click on these tables. It will give you the list of tables which are available. We have a table called as a student, but we do not have a table called as a student underscore whatever. So this is a table which I would like to create, and we have each thing is separated, and each column should be separated by a comma. When you are creating a table, each column and the data type should be separated by comma. So when you try and execute this one, so this will try and create the table. See, let's say if you want to create a table here, and select the statement which you want to execute and hit Control Enter or F9. So I want to create now this table student. So just hit enter. So now this is what table is created. So if you want to check whether this table is created or not, so just right click on it, first refresh it so that it can refresh all the tables which is there. So this is the table, just double click on it, it will open up the structure of the table in another window. This is student ID, student name, course, data type, and then you have the other things. So if you go to the data, there will be no data. So you just created a table, but you have not added any data. So that's how you can create a table to the, the simple, that's how you can create a table, and by using a SQL developer. So you can start using SQL developer, and if you want to get the comfort about the the SQL Plus also, you can also use SQL Plus and then do that. Now, let's say how to add the data. So if you see, we have seen the DDL statement, how to define it. And we have defined a table by using a create command. Then how can I add the data to it? By using a insert statement. So how to add the data? So let's say, let me just show you a simple example, and then I'll accept your questions so that we'll understand about it. So how to add it? So by using an insert statement. Insert into, there is a table, you need to give the table name. I want to add a data to this. Insert into student, and let's say you need to give the list of column names for which you are inserting the data into. I'm inserting the data into student ID, let's say the student name. So it is not necessarily to be in the same order actually. Course and fee, let's say the join date or whatever. So this is which you have, and values. So suppose, let's say, what is a student ID? So I want to enter a student ID as 100, and student name, let's say, so Rajesh. So whenever you are providing a character input in SQL, you need to provide that in the single quotes. And course, let's say the ETL testing. So this is a course which I've joined, and the fee, let's say 400, and the join date, let's say you want to define a number, you can directly enter it, and whenever you are providing a character input. Join date, let's say a date also you can provide in the single quotes, or you can suppose, let's say this is a joining date of the student. So by default, in general, we represent the date in the DD-MON-YYY format. So you can just provide the date in this format, it will be there. So at the end of the cell insert statement, you can add it. So suppose, let's say you want to execute this, so just add it. Now the row is inserted. So whenever you are using a DML statement, insert, update, delete, always you have to use a commit and rollback with respect to it. So commit is used to save the changes permanently. So commit your work. So whatever this is there, now the data is committed. So how would I view that there is a record which is added to that? So go to the student, either you can refresh it here, which will retrieve you the data what you have added, or if you want to retrieve the data from a table, you can also use the command called as a select star from. What is the table name? Select is a command to read the data. Star indicates all the column names. And what is the table name that you want to read it? Student underscore and 2008-2014. So try and execute this. This will give you the list of records which are available in the student table. So this is how you can retrieve the data from table. So similarly, if you just want to add another row, so that is your insert into. So suppose, let's say I want to add another one. So this, let's say the ETL testing, and they have joined on 28th August. And the student ID is different, which I want to give 101. So try and execute this one. So this will give you row, and then which you commit the data. Committing, you can also use this option, F11 or this. Now try and view the data. There will be 2 records which will be available. So that is how you can add a data to it. Suppose, let's say you want to update the data. That we'll see, when we go to the later classes, we'll see how to update the data, delete the data and all. For now, I just shown you how to create a table and how to add a data to the table, in using it. So I would like to hear if you have any questions so far, whatever we have discussed, and then move forward with the next things.
Yeah, Karthik, this is Neelja speaking. As a tester, I would like to know, do we have access to creating and deleting tables?
Yeah, you will be having access to create the tables, because when you are performing a regression testing, right? So that time what happens, you need to take the backup of the table and then compare that backup data with the newly loaded data. So for a regression testing. So that time I'll show you, using a subquery, you can take the backup of the table. So that backup table, yes, there you'll be having an access to create a table. In your schema, yes, there will be an action.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Hi Karthik, I didn't get the point when you say the user and schema are the same. So
Okay.
Schema is just set of tables, right?
Yeah. Schema is a set of tables. Now here SQL1, what you can call SQL1 as a user or a schema, any name. Both are interchangeable. So user is nothing but who has access to the database and can create the group of tables. A schema is nothing but a group of tables. Using a schema name also, you can connect to the database.
Or since the user can have can create a schema, and that's why they are interchangeable.
In fact, whenever you create a user, user itself is referred as a schema.
Okay.
That,
so that's what I'm asking. Since user has the privilege to create a schema for himself, that's why you are mentioning the user as a schema?
Yes, you might call it in that way, but since the user can be able to create all the tables, whatever the objects which are required, so you can call that as a schema. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Karthik.
Hi Karthik, David here. I have one doubt, Karthik.
Yes, go ahead.
You inserted 2 rows, right? So is any possible to insert multiple rows for single command and single insert?
There is, using an SQL, it is not possible to insert a multiple records at a time, but when you go to the advanced languages like PLSQL and all, yes, you can insert a group of records at a time with the help of queries and all. But here in SQL, we cannot insert more than one record.
Okay, thanks.
Karthik, we can do that, right? Using that ampersand, whenever the user prompts, you can.
That is, yes, that is for a substitution. But ultimately, you are inserting only one record, not more than one record. So when I use an ampersand here, ampersand 1, ampersand 2 and all, so every time your query will prompt it you are entering the data, and that is one record will get inserted, and then it will go to the next record and then inserted.
So anyway, every time you should prompt.
There is some advanced line, yeah, insert all, which you can use. In the advanced PLSQL and all, we'll actually use it to insert the data, but general SQL, this is how we can insert only one record at a time. Okay, so if you're done with your questions, and then now we'll talk about the little bit of SQL part, what we are going to discuss. So we're going to set up the schema for, we're going to set up the SQL practice environment for you by, we'll send maybe in a day or two, we'll set up the SQL practice environment on your machine, and you can start executing the queries on your own, like when we have practice here. And see, when we actually do it, we are not going to create each and every table and populate the data, something like this. So what we are going to do is, there are tables which will be pre-created, that is with the help of a scripts. We'll create the schema for you, or we'll create the user account for you, and we'll create all these tables which we use. We'll create all these tables which we use for practice. So all these tables will be pre-created in your database whenever we actually set up an access for you, or pre-created in your schema, and we'll just start accessing it. So when we start understanding about your SQL, first we are not going to sit and define each and every table and start adding the data to whatever the tables that we want. And as a tester, you'll more predominantly use a DRL language, that is your data retrieval language, how to use a select statement and everything. So these things we are going to spend more time on the data retrieval language. So this will start with a data retrieval language first, how to read the data from tables. So why we have discussed all these things, to just to give you the basic idea about what is a table and how to add a data to the table. And when we set up an access, so we should will obviously get a question saying that how did we get these tables and all. And these tables are pre-created, and we have already populated the data into it, and we'll just start understanding the SQL. We'll just start understanding the SQL, how to read it. So in the first 7 chapters or the 6 chapters, we'll predominantly understand how to write SQL statements, select statements to read the data from single table, multiple tables, and what are the different options that we have. All those things we will discuss, and then we'll move on understanding about what is a DDL things, DML at the high level, because anyway, as a tester, you're not going to define an actual structure of the table, but anyway, that's good to know. Like, we'll also understand about the views, other database type of objects and everything, we'll see. And we'll also talk about some analytical functions, which is very much helpful in your real time and all, so that we will see that. And first 7 chapters, as I said, like, we'll understand only about the select statement, how efficiently we can write a complex SQL queries. And we'll also talk about some real-time approaches, real-time scenarios, which I'll bring up, and then you will also provide you the hands-on exercises for each and every chapter. Once we complete, we'll provide you the hands-on exercises and some real-time scenarios where you can start understanding about all the queries and everything. And that way we'll kickstart our ETL testing class full-fledgedly from by understanding the first thing. So that is your select statement and everything. So by tomorrow we'll send you all the details to set up the Oracle on your systems, and we'll set up the Oracle and Informatica, everything together at the same time, so that BI, it is not possible to set up the BI because it will be a huge image. It will be a bigger image, which it will be difficult to set up the OBIE on your machine. But anyway, we'll provide you the server access for during the course, so you can actually access our server and then see how the reports can be viewed, and all the UI you can check it. So which we'll do it as the days progresses. So from tomorrow we'll just start with the SQL things. So let me just open a contents, like how we go forward about it. So we'll understand SQL first. So SQL will take at least close to 7 classes, and once we complete SQL, then we go with the data warehouse and all those things. So this is, I think it's directly with the data warehouse design. SQL, yeah, will do the SQL as well as part of this. Okay, so probably from tomorrow we'll just start with the first chapter, and that is how to read, how to write a simple queries and how to read the data from your simple database. And on a day-to-day basis, whatever the queries that I write, I'll also send you the notes whatever I'm making here, and you can just keep that for a reference. And we'll also share the complete material what is required. The complete material what is required for in this ETL testing course. Everything will be shared as part of once we share all the installation files and everything, right? So that's how we'll proceed from here. And any questions or anything, you can always reach out to us on mail, and which will help you. Okay, so that's it I have for the day. And from tomorrow, we'll start the general SQL, like how to read the data from it, and then this one. So on a day-to-day basis, anyway, I'll just keep all your SQLs what you're practicing here, and then I'll send you also to you to practice, right? So that's it I have for this today, and you can drop off and if you do not have any further questions.
Karthik, leave it here. What is the system requirement you have to install in Oracle?
Yes, yes, very good. I missed that. If you have to set up, and that setup has to be proper to do that and all, so that has to be i3 and above processor would be good, i3 and above, because we have to set up Oracle, Informatica, everything, so to practice for you. I mean, practice in the sense you just have to view all those programs and everything. So if you do not have also, I mean, we'll set up a server access for you, but that will be there only till the end of the course, and after the course we'll not be able to provide you the server access. And RAM should be greater than 4 GB, greater than or equal to 4 GB, and memory which you require is around 50 GB of memory, and processor speed should be above 2.4 gigahertz. So this will be the, I mean, good configuration to set up. Any OS is fine, because we are going to set up a VM for you, and any OS would be fine. We don't have any issues in doing it, right? So that is a minimum configuration which you need to have to set up all the things. So we'll set up as a VM. So we'll set up a VM and we'll install all these things on this. So when you move in as an ETL tester, it is also possible that, you know, you'll have either you can have a SQL Server database or a Teradata database or Oracle database, any of these three databases predominantly, but the SQLs, whatever we learn, that will be same. I mean, like most of the time it will be the same. Here and there will be some changes. So I'll try to have a word with the people, I mean admin team here, and then we'll try to set up the VM which will contain all these databases. We'll have a Teradata, as well as, you know, you'll have a Informatica server, as well as the other one. So all those things will set up so that you can practice the SQLs if required. When you start attending the interviews, you can practice the SQLs on all the types of databases, so that you'll not have any issues in doing it. So that is a minimum requirement for you know, the system which we use. Okay. That's it. That's it I have. So let's say that I can just call it as day one.
Karthik, is there a way that we can extend the classes a little bit from tomorrow?
Maybe this week is a little bit tough for me, and from next week, yes, definitely we'll extend the classes for 1.5 hours or 2 hours. I don't mind, because I have one Informatica batch which I'm handling, and that is due at 6:30. That's why I'm just winding up a little early and before we start. So from next week, yes.
Okay.
Right, Karthik?
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Sujata, and I just need some inputs from you. Like you called to Ishwar, right? So okay, anyway, I'll drop you a mail. You can just reply back to that mail. Thanks.
Sure, yeah.